You guys hear me? Good? Good morning. My name is Marcel Porras. I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer for the Los Angeles Department of Transportation. Welcome this morning. Thank you all for making it out. I know that Monday mornings can be a grind sometimes, so we appreciate you guys. And just real quick, how many people carpooled here? All right. How many people rode their bike here? Anybody? All right. How many people took transit? All right. Anybody drive by themselves? All right. Proudly. So listen, it's 9:30, so we want to be respectful of everyone's time. We're trying to get you guys out of here at 11. We're going to do a quick housekeeping. So we have bathrooms that are located over here on this side. If anyone didn't grab coffee, we have coffee in the back. And we're going to start off, we're going to introduce Matt Peterson from LASI. We're going to move into a presentation by LADOT General Manager Selita Reynolds. And then we're going to convene a technical panel to answer any questions that we might have on the RFQ. We are WebExing the RFQ pre-bid this morning, and that will be available online as well. The recording along with all the answers to the questions that might be submitted. So I'm really proud to present and introduce a good friend of mine, Matt Peterson. He is the new Executive Director, CEO, big boss man here at the Los Angeles Clean Tech Incubator, formerly the first Chief Sustainability Officer for Mayor Garcetti. Did a lot of great work on transportation and sustainability. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce Matt Peterson.
Thank you, Marcel. It's great to have you all here today. Welcome to LACI. This is our campus, and it's really your campus. So we are welcome here anytime. And I'm just got to say quickly, I'm impressed. Marcel and Selita got everybody here in their seats by 9:30. Very good job. It's rare at a meeting like this to get everybody on time. It's impressive in LA. Well, we're really excited about what you're about to embark on and what Selita and Marcel have put forth here as a call to you all to help shape the future of transportation in Los Angeles. Selita, Marcel, and myself, and the team at DOT have spent a lot of time together when I was in the mayor's office, working to figure out how do we really unlock innovation. There's a couple $2 words in there, but it's true. How do you really get people working together and collaborate in a way that we haven't been able to see before to deliver last mile, first mile solutions, active mobility solutions, make sure an autonomous future. And in my case, I'm really curious about it and passionate about an autonomous future that's shared and electric and has plenty of active transit options for people to get from point A to point B and be able to live their lives in this city that is so defined by mobility, in particular the single occupancy vehicle. Last week I was with Mayor Garcetti. I still advise him as a member of the LA Sustainability Leadership Council and board chair of Climate Mayors, a group we started across the country to get mayors to work together on climate change, and they've all 380 of them have adopted the Paris Climate Agreement in their city, as LA has. And in LA, a lot of our mobility challenges are also defined by air quality GHG challenges. The remaining statewide, the biggest source of greenhouse gas emissions is transportation. Certainly the biggest source of air pollution in Los Angeles and the region is goods movement in particular, but transportation overall. And we really need to figure out how we do it. And our lives, as we all know, are defined by traffic. We talked about with the mayor last week at the Leadership Council, really this future of mobility isn't just about vehicles or trains or buses or microtransit or EV car share. It's also about land use. It's also about behavior. And so how do we really unlock the solutions that you're all going to be on the bench to help provide to LADOT? And we're really excited to see what's going to come forth. We just closed this new mobility challenge that we put out there. It wasn't a lot of money. We put up $25,000 in partnership with another organization to see what kind of solutions entrepreneurs want to put forth. And to me, some of the most exciting things that are happening in this building, of course, are from our startups, our founders who are entrepreneurs, are really coming at and trying to solve things from the market But we also know from Mayor Garcetti's leadership, from Salita's leadership, we need policymakers helping set the bar so that we can set the path we want to head. So in LA, we're moving towards electrification of transportation. In zero-emission goods movement, we're moving towards, really trying to, Vision Zero, just trying to remember the talking points, and really trying to make it safe for people to walk and bike and get around LA. And these things all have to work together along with housing and land use and parks, and how do we get more amenities into the neighborhoods. So we're really excited about what you're doing here today, and grateful for our partnership with the LADOT, and look forward to working together into the future. So have a great meeting, and look forward to what's going to come next. So, Marcel.
Again, let's give it up for Matt for hosting us today. Thanks, Matt. I'd like to introduce next one of our fearless leaders here in the city, Salita Reynolds. She's the general manager of LADOT. Started pretty soon after the mayor took office here, and really brought around a drastic culture change within the department, and has really positioned us to really take a leading role in the country as we look at mobility, from improving accessibility, increasing safety, and really just making LA a great place to live and work and visit. Salita has a bunch of feathers in her caps, having worked for multiple cities and 10 years as a consultant, being on the other side of these meetings. She now currently is the president of NACTO, the North American City Transportation Officials. Close. But another very progressive organization, really driving innovation across the country as it relates to transportation and mobility. And so I'm really fortunate to call her a friend and a mentor and a colleague. And so with that, I'd like to introduce Salita.
Thanks, Marcel, and thanks again, Matt, for hosting us. Matt and I have had a lot of spirited debates about EVs versus AVs versus shared mobility, and I think he made me a believer in EVs, and I made him a believer in shared mobility and AVs. So I'm really happy to be here, and really thank you for hosting us here at Lacey, because this is a space for innovation and creative thinking, and a much more sort of appropriate space for this kickoff meeting than the basement of Caltrans headquarters. So thank you for coming. We're so happy to see you here. Really appreciate your time. And I'm just gonna, my interest today is to walk through with all of you how the city and how LADOT is thinking about the future of transportation in Los Angeles. And we've really been thinking about it now for the last 2 years, and thinking deeply about it, and working with actually many of you who are in the room. You have shaped and inspired a lot of the ideas that we're now putting forward. And this week is really a culmination of a lot of that work. This pre-bid conference this afternoon, we are doing a workshop on a customer bill of rights that we're trying to develop to refocus what we deliver on user experience. And tomorrow we are kicking off the first citywide AV working group with representatives from Department on Disability, Department on Aging, all the public works bureaus, planning, to really have the city thinking carefully about the future of transportation. So when people ask me what I'm up to at LADOT, it really falls into these three categories. One, first and foremost, is to build safe, beautiful streets. And sort of underpinning this is the city's commitment to getting to zero traffic deaths by the year 2025. Last year was a banner year for traffic deaths, the highest in the last 50 years. And it's not a trend that we want to see continue. And we think that technology, and particularly technology in the vehicle, is contributing to the rise in severe and fatal traffic crashes because of the huge uptick that cannot be explained by the usual factors that we look to. But we also know that technology can be a powerful tool to get to our safety goals and outcomes, which brings us to the second bucket, which is mobility management. So the job of a Department of Transportation in the year 2017 can no longer just be about infrastructure delivery. It has to be about using the convening power of government to bring together private and public mobility providers in service of of the public who we serve, to make sure that public transit is still delivered as a public good, no matter how we define that, and not necessarily only for private profit. And the last bucket, which we won't spend too much time on today, or really any time on unless you're a bunch of organizational management nerds, is focusing on making LADOT a really great place to work. I'm the 8th general manager in the last 14 years, and I've been here 3 years. So, you think about how to be successful in those first 2 buckets. It is entirely contingent on my success in the 3rd bucket. So, across all of the bottom, you see equity. Equity is not something that sits on top of our agenda. Equity is our agenda. And when I say equity, I intentionally mean racial and socioeconomic equity. Los Angeles is the least affordable city in the country when you compare the cost of housing to prevailing wages. And if that trend continues, and if AVs in particular spur and exacerbate that trend, we will lose all of the things about the city that we love. Its diversity, its opportunity, its welcoming generosity to everyone. So just a beat on Vision Zero, because I do think it is really fundamental to the way that we're thinking about AVs. And in Los Angeles County, traffic deaths are the #1 cause of death for kids under the age of 14. Not accidental deaths, all deaths. These are preventable tragedies, and this is a public health crisis. And we know that systems design and systems thinking is the way that we can conquer it. So it's about culture change, but it's also about the design of the streets, and it's also about the design of the vehicles themselves. Some of the largest leaps in safety in the last 50 years in the United States have really been thanks to the design of the car. Airbags, child safety seats, seat belts, right? And those are opportunities for us to continue to explore with private sector. The other thing that we focus on, sort of shifting into mobility management, is connecting people to opportunity. So you don't need to read the fine print. I'll give you the punchline on this slide, which is that in Los Angeles, you can reach about 12 times as many jobs in an hour by car as you can in an hour by transit. And we hope that that begins to change as we begin to build out the largest capital transit improvement program in North America. But for the moment, this is what it looks like. And as much as this is a map of before and after the passage of Measure M, what Metro was going to be able to build in LA County. And it's a really inspiring map. It's really exciting. You look at the transit and light rail coverage that's going to really reach into all parts of this county and connect people, and it's great. And when I've had a really rough day, sometimes I go home and I just play this on a loop and I calm myself down. But this is Uber's coverage after being in Los Angeles County for only 2 years. And if you saw the report from UC Davis, the working paper that came out last week, what we know is that the people who are using these services are younger, wealthier, and urban. And that they are taking trips off of public transit and light rail. So we can see immediately that services from technology companies like Uber, like Lyft, have tremendous power to extend the reach of public transit. We will never build a network that looks like this. And that is the power of the private sector and private mobility. But it has to go in concert, and it cannot take away from the fundamental services that we need to provide to everyone in Los Angeles, no matter how old you are, no matter how wealthy you are, no matter how able-bodied you are. So that's really, what we've been thinking a lot about. And in particular, one of the issues for cities is that we do not regulate Uber and Lyft. They're regulated at the state, so we don't have really very many regulatory powers. And we know that they are gateway drugs for what's coming next. Because as much as autonomy has to offer, one of the main things it offers is centralized management of fleets. So as we think about, a tremendous investment voted on by the voters to build out a light rail system and continue to be in the business of delivering public transit, and the pressures and competition from other mobility services, we want to be forward-looking and we want to be future-guiding. We don't want to be future-phobic, and we don't want to be future-accepting. So, in Los Angeles, we are crushed and defined by the vehicle. And we just got the dubious honor of passing the 3-digit mark in NRIX's measurement of how long people spend in traffic. In Los Angeles, people now spend over 100 hours every year in traffic. So we are, we have bad congestion, we have safety issues, we have tremendous challenges that we think that autonomy and sort of shared mobility could help us overcome. So we took time to look into our crystal ball and think that through. The opportunities are huge. When you hear optimists talk about the future, they talk about consolidating the fleet, they talk about being able to manage what we have instead of engaging in this continuous sort of fruitless effort to build our way out of congestion. We look at big opportunities in terms of the 200 square miles in Los Angeles County that are devoted to parking, right? The storage of private dormant vehicles when that land is in such high demand for open space, schools, affordable housing, all of these other things. If you don't need as many parking spaces, that opens up and unlocks tremendous value for people in Los Angeles. There's a flip side to that, which is a financial consideration. LADOT manages 37,000 on and off street parking meters. We also manage parking tickets, and the adjudication of those parking tickets, but the two of those things account for $200 million annually into the city's general fund. So if the need for parking is eroded or diminished completely, and if robots don't get parking tickets because they don't break rules, then what does that mean for the city's finances? And what are the new financial models that we can be pursuing and thinking about? This is all, though, the outcome if we get it right. It is more likely that we will get it wrong. And the public policy moves necessary to get to that utopian outcome are not easy. So we need all of the partnership and best minds that we can get to move the policy in the right direction. So we came out with this last year. This is Urban Mobility in a Digital Age. It is our roadmap for how the city prepares for autonomous vehicles, how we can influence the convergence of electrification, shared mobility, and autonomy. And it was written by an architect, which I think was a really good thing because her approach was really to start with the city and the public realm and the people in it, and then map out how we could use transportation technology as a tool to get to those outcomes. So it has 5 buckets. In each of these 5 buckets, there are short, medium, and long-term goals and deliverables. And as we thought about how we were going to achieve each of them, and some of them are very ambitious, things like universal fare, things like sort of a consolidated digital dispatch for all public transit in the city. We knew that we couldn't do it alone. And so we wanted to see how we could get collaboration sparked with our partners in the private sector who we think can do that. So the first one is build a solid data foundation. The next one is about centering on the user experience and something we call transportation happiness, which we could use more of in Los Angeles. The third is about partnerships and collaboration. The fourth is about using and leveraging the data that's coming from the fleet on a constant basis to improve the way that we deliver infrastructure and services. And the last is to get to a fully autonomous transit fleet. LADOT operates a transit fleet of about 350 vehicles. We move about 22 million trips every year through Dash and Commuter Express. So we have our own laboratory that is contracted out already to a private provider that we think can be a good place for us to start. So the 3 legs of that stool are first to provide data as a service. We have already data sharing agreements with companies like Waze. We use that data to make their algorithms smarter by pushing out information to them about the hundreds of street closures that happen in Los Angeles every day. And we use their data to make our integrated traffic management system better. The system that we have already saves people about 40 hours a year, but we know that it could probably get even better, even smarter, even faster. And so we use the crowdsourced data from Waze to do that. The second is about mobility as a service. So we launched in partnership with Conduent about a year and a half ago an app called GoLA that is an aggregator. So it pulls together all of the different choices that somebody has to get from A to B. And eventually you will be able to book and pay for those services in one app. So rather than having 25, 30 different apps on your phone, you just have one. So this was a good first step. We learned a lot from this, and we're hoping that we can push this model further and wider. And the last is infrastructure as a service. So I talked a little bit about our worries about the financial models and about how we are going to pay for and deliver an optimized network of streets for autonomous vehicles, and how we are going to leverage potentially the street space that opens up if we don't need it all the time for traffic movement. So in this bucket are really economic questions about supply and demand in the market, about pricing, about curbside management, about curbside pricing, about congestion pricing as well. And nobody's head exploded. That was awesome. So we do think that what we're really interested as well is design, because we think that the infrastructure of the future is changeable infrastructure, so that if you live on a street, maybe in the morning there's a mobility lane that takes, your taxi bot picks you up and takes you and your friends to work. In the afternoon, it opens up, it becomes a playground, it becomes a plaza, it becomes a park, and then in the evening, it becomes a place where people can sit outside and have dinner and watch movies. And if we are able to push information to the fleet of vehicles on the road in a dynamic, continuous way, then street closures like this and changeable infrastructure like this is much more within reach. So this is very much an intentional part of our thinking. We're also looking at something we call mobility hubs, which also has a design component. That a mobility hub is where we pull together, EV car sharing, bike sharing, green taxis, all of those things in a neighborhood hub. We invite commerce in, so it really becomes the heart of a neighborhood and tackles all of those short trips. About 47% of trips in Los Angeles under 5 miles, 85% of those made in a single occupant vehicle, right? So how can we set the table with hospitality and generosity and invite people to make different choices and make those choices easy and seamless and safe? We're doing these investments in parts of the city with a very intentional focus on equity. So this is LA's first promise zone. It is around the Westlake neighborhood, around MacArthur Park. This is where a lot of mobility hubs are concentrated, EV car sharing is concentrated, and our federal grant to do a lot of connected infrastructure and transit is also concentrated in the promise zone. We've worked closely with our partners at almost every level of government, the state, the county, metro, the MPO, which is the Southern California Association of Governments, to identify proving grounds for autonomous and connected vehicles throughout the county. So what we think is, we're not trying to be M-City, we're not trying to be Contra Costa County, but when you're ready for prime time, we want you to come to Los Angeles. And if your technology is ready for a campus environment, we've got UCLA. If you want to be in more of a sort of a mixed flow, controlled environment, we've got Exposition Park. If you want to be mixing with buses and bikes and walking, we've got the Warner Center and the Orange Line. So these are places where every level of government has agreed to streamline permissions and oversight for testing and deployment of connected autonomous vehicles and infrastructure. So we've done some homework in trying to pull together all of our government partners to make it easy for folks to come work in Los Angeles. And we've also done quite a bit of thinking about the partnerships that we've already been developing. So how does an idea become sort of an idea in my brain or Marcel's brain or somebody else's brain to being pushed out to the bench? Well, it comes that way through partnerships and conversations. Some of those ideas will come from the urban mobility transportation tech strategy that we have, but others come through partnerships and conversations and collaboration. So some examples of that, we mapped out over 50 current sort of conversations, partnerships, and collaborations that we have. Mayor Garcetti co-chairs the Advisory Committee on Autonomous Transportation with Mary Barra from General Motors, for example. So we wanted to map out that partnership and those opportunities. Blue LA currently is the provider of the EV car sharing that I talked about, so we wanted to map that out as well. So we can understand and get our arms around where our partners are and where the potentials are to do more work together. So these are our tactics and how we're going to get there. We think about the bench as a place where we're doing sort of constant iterative testing and a place for us to take risks. We have a current bench, and we push projects out to that bench that from $100,000 to $8 million, dozens of them over the life of that bench. This bench will be no different. We don't think there's going to be less money for this bench. We think there's going to be more money between Measure M and other dollars that are coming to the city through SB1 and the gas tax, et cetera. And so this is kind of, we've spent a lot of time trying to think through in an organized way how we want to go about this. And the bench is one tool for that. The bench is not an incubator. The bench is not federalized. So if a project is federalized, it can't go out to the bench. But the bench is also not the only way that we expect to work together with community-based organizations and private companies. And with that, I'm happy to turn it back over to Marcel. Thank you.
Just want to keep us moving along. I want to introduce Michael Lim. Michael Lim has spent the last year as an advisor to LADOT as part of the FUSE program, and he comes with us with both public and private sector experience in finance and in technology initiatives as well. So I'm going to introduce Mike to come up, and he's going to go ahead and moderate our technical panel.
Thanks, Marcel. So welcome everyone. We're going to go into the technical panel portion of our today's agenda. But before we do that, I want to quickly go through some of the rules and also some of the key points of the RFQ process. Just give me a second here. Great. Okay, so this should be part of the RFQ package. You should already have access to it. But want to make sure that we're on the same page in terms of the timeline. I want to specifically call out 3 components of our timeline. Number one, if you have any questions, please make sure you submit them within the next 2 days. We also have the submission date for November 17th. That is in about 5 weeks' time. So please make sure that you submit your application by that time, otherwise you're going to be disqualified. Also want to note that there's a blackout period starting from the submission date until the contracts are negotiated. LA City also has a very specific way of doing things, and want to make sure that you're fully aware of the fact that on the day of the submission, we require 6 hard copy applications along with a soft copy, and that should be delivered in person to LADOT. The address is articulated here, City of Los Angeles, Department of Transportation, 100 South Main Street, 10th floor. And if you can please address it to Dick Wong, Senior Management Analyst, we'd appreciate it. There were a number of you that came up to us and asked about trade secrets and IP. There is a way to protect yourself. Please make sure that when you submit your application that you identify in writing all copyrighted material, trade secrets, and other proprietary information so that we can support the protection of some of this information. We would require that you agree to defend any action brought against the city. Additional details are in the RFQ document as well. So now we'll go into Q&A rules and guidelines. We have 1 hour for Q&A. Key questions should be focused on the program itself rather than some of the minutia around city processes. We can answer some of those questions through Q&A through online channels and also email. Unanswered questions can be answered and submitted, or can be submitted at registration desk. You may have noticed it as you walked in. You can also submit some of these questions through our email address, which is ladot.innovation@lacity.org. And no in-person questions to city staff is allowed during meet and greet after Q&A. This will be video recorded, and all the Q&A will be posted on LA Babin. So moving on, without further ado, we can get started with the Q&A panel discussion here. Our first panelist is Celita Reynolds. We've already introduced her. She is the General Manager for the City of LA, LADOT. Our second panelist is Michael Nagel. He is a Deputy City Attorney in the Office of Los Angeles City Attorney, where he oversees transportation-related topics. Our third panelist is Angela Bierman, who is a Chief Management Analyst of the Budget and Administration Division at LADOT, where she oversees about $1 billion in annual funding. She has spent over 17 years of experience in city finance and administration, and has also worked for the mayor in public works and transportation funding. And our last panelist is Dick Wong, who is a senior management analyst in the budget and administration division for LADOT. He also serves as the department contractor coordinator for LADOT, and he has more than 25 years of experience in contract administration and contract compliance. Dick was instrumental in setting up this bench contract for LADOT. He's also administrating existing bench contracts comprising of 90+ companies. So at this juncture, we'll take questions. We have 2 mics circulating at the moment. Please raise your hand and we'll get them to you. Please also state your name and your organization before asking your question. And also please keep your question one at a time so that others can also ask questions as well. Okay, we'll start from here.
Y'all are.
Yeah, there should be 2 mics circulating at the moment.
So my question, I'm Dan Lukasik with Parsons. Can you comment on any links or goals between this program and the 2028 Olympics?
So the question is about whether or not there are direct links between this bench and the 2028 Olympics. So the mayor announced a couple weeks ago his aspiration sort of in 2 areas. One is to use the long runway that we have between now and 2028 to make Los Angeles the healthiest city in America. And for transportation, what that means is getting kids and families in Los Angeles access to opportunities for physical recreation and for physical activity. And so two of the biggest barriers people articulate when they talk about why they don't use a park in their neighborhood are transportation and safety. So we know that we have a big role to play in connecting people to that healthiest city in America goal. And one of the ways that we're thinking about it is how can we use, whether it's autonomous sort of transit, microtransit, or bike sharing, or other sort of modes to connect to sort of help meet that goal. So over the next probably 6 to 8 months, we'll be doing a lot of work and thinking and mapping about where those barriers exist and where there are opportunities to sort of eliminate those barriers around transportation. The second thing the mayor announced is that he wants to deliver 28 projects by 2028. A lot of those are large, ambitious projects that the city supports, but Metro delivers. Things like Sepulveda Pass and other sort of big things that are in the Measure M compendium of projects. What we are anticipating and expecting is that our job will be to make sure that those big projects have connectivity into neighborhoods. And we see this bench and sort of the people that we hope are on this bench as some of the folks who are going to be helping to provide that. So, have I mapped it all out? No. But do we know that there's tremendous expectation that Los Angeles show up as, extremely advanced around technology and transportation in 2028? Yes. And so this is our first step in that direction.
Carlos here.
Thank you. Carlos Ortiz with Vantec. Metro has a program to like 200 budget first and last mile program.
Carlos, I don't think it's on.
Hello? Can you hear me? Okay. All right, Carlos Ortiz with Vantec. Metro has a program to do the first and last mile, about 200 projects in the next 5 years or so. How is this project tied to that program?
So the question is, how does the bench tie into, and what we hope to accomplish with the bench, tie into Metro's First Last Mile program of projects? So one of the funding sources, a very important funding source for the work that's going to go out to this bench, comes from Measure M to the central subregion, which is comprised wholly of the city of Los Angeles. So Los Angeles also exists in a whole bunch of other fragmented places, but there's one program that the city controls exclusively. And in that central subregion program of projects is the first money that is going to flow to the city of Los Angeles is in a category called mobility hubs and first last mile. So that is approximately, I forget how many millions of dollars every year. We can provide that information, but that money starts flowing into the city basically this fiscal year. So we're hoping and anticipating that through our partnership with Metro and also with their Office of Extraordinary Innovation, we're going to be able to tap that funding source to deliver on some of those first last mile ideas that Metro has, because Metro's jurisdiction doesn't extend to city streets, right? So the partnership in delivering first last mile has to include and involve in an intentional way the city. So there's not a, do I have a list of the first 5 projects that are going to go out to the bench from that? No. But I have the funding source, and we have sort of the, Metro's done a lot of good thinking and planning around how those are going to be delivered.
Roger.
Hi, I'm Rajit Gar. I'm a professor at UCLA, and in my spare time, I'm director of the UCLA Electric Smart Grid Program. Also co-founder of an EV charging company called Move, and also a director of the Connected Autonomous Electric Vehicle Project, which is a new project launched in UCLA, where we are trying to create a local demonstration in the campus with smaller autonomous electric vehicles that would potentially charge automatically from under the ground. We have a bunch of industry partners. We have started down the process. The question is, how does a project like this in the UCLA campus, and I saw you had UCLA there on the bottom left, you also had USC, that's good. We actually work closely together with them. The question is, how does a project like that connect to the city's goals from the standpoint of, we talked of connected, autonomous electric vehicle. It's CAEV is the name of the UCLA program. But in particular, the connectivity, the communications, and the infrastructure. What's your vision on that?
So the question is, I guess there's a lot of questions in there. One is, we have a lot of, we're lucky to have a very robust technology community in Los Angeles right now already. And we're lucky to have academic institutions like UCLA, USC, others, and companies that are already incubating and doing great work around mobility. And how does their work tie into this bench? That was one question. And the second is really, I think, a bigger question about how the city is going to deliver on a smart grid or on the kind of infrastructure that's necessary for aggressive EV fleet adoption. Is that fair? Sweet. Okay, so on the first question, the first question is, how does all this stuff going on in the private marketplace, how does it connect to the bench? The answer is, that's the whole reason we put the bench together, right? Because our normal request for proposal process would take 18 to 24 months to do a single project with a company that we want to sort of use public funds to invest in and learn from and do a demonstration or do a pilot. And we simply don't have the luxury of that time. And so the idea is, how can we get all of the best, smartest companies and thinkers cleared and pre-qualified to work with the city? So we sat down with a company like yours and looked at the data and evaluation, the things you were learning from the deployment and testing on the campus, and decided that we wanted to roll that out in the Arts District, for example. The bench is the way that we can do that in a matter of weeks, not a matter of years in some cases. So that's really why we put the transportation technology strategy together, because we wanted to be very specific and intentional about what our goals were, right? And so if what you're doing fits into what we're trying to accomplish to prepare the city for a connected, autonomous, electric, shared future, then we're interested, right? And we want to figure out how we can be an activist investor to nudge the sort of research and development cycle on the private side towards the things that we're interested in. And transit is a good example. There are very few companies creating autonomous transit vehicles right now of any size. And that's something that we know we're very interested in. So we want the bench to be a place where we can take dollars and invest in those companies and attract companies to invest in that research and development themselves. The second bigger question about electric infrastructure, I wish Matt were still here because I would just give him the microphone. But the city is the mayor in particular is very bullish on EVs and very aggressively pursuing different funding sources for the city to build out EV infrastructure. And the EV car sharing program that we launched in and around MacArthur Park is a good example of that. We aggressively went after cap and trade dollars to bring a first of its kind EV car sharing program where the Blue LA actually invests in and builds the infrastructure, and it's available to their car sharing vehicles, but it's also available to private users. And through the transformative climate communities opportunities and others that we expect to continue to come from cap and trade and other sources, those are the ways that we're going to be building out and growing sort of the charging infrastructure that's necessary.
And we have one from online. Hi, this question is from Understand AI. They ask, as a startup, we are convinced that we can help build LA's vision, but might not be able to qualify right now due to different reasons. Will there be another RFQ for the program between now and 2028?
So the answer to that is, first, yes, we hope so. There will be another, the bench that we have now has actually been in place for 6 years? 6 years. So we've done it twice, 2 3-year cycles. So we do expect that there will be another 3-year cycle that will happen at some point in the future. But the other thing about the bench that's important is that, there are a lot of requirements to do business with the city of Los Angeles. There are commercial liability insurance requirements, business tax requirements. Again, the bench is not an incubator for startups. But what we did sort of on purpose was to unlock the ability for larger companies to team with smaller companies and startups. So even if you are not eligible or cannot qualify to be on the bench right now, even in the next 3 years, we may push an opportunity out to the bench, and one of the larger companies on the bench might want to engage a smaller startup and team with them to respond to that opportunity. Another example that we've actually used a contract that we have with a nonprofit to run a challenge, right? So we gave them funding, and they went out and did a challenge grant for smaller community-based organizations and artists in Los Angeles, and awarded 10 of those contracts to those smaller folks, and then sort of they played that coordinating role. So we like to think of the bench as a place that makes us very flexible and nimble, and offers us and you a lot of opportunities to form interesting partnerships.
Over there, lady in the back.
Hi. Some of the most interesting possibilities that you were presenting don't have directly to do with technology. They have to do with urban design or more integrated concepts. So my question is, how can we put across concepts that have to do with the flexibility of infrastructure, closing off districts and opening them up at certain times, kind of changing the design of temporarily or not certain parts of the city in order to achieve some of these objectives.
So to clarify, do you mean how can you put that across in your statement of qualifications, or how can you share those ideas with the city?
Yeah, how is that going to, I guess it's a more general question, first of all, is that part of what you're looking for? And second of all, how is that going to play out in your procurement process over the next few years?
So the answer to the first question is yes, absolutely. That is very intentionally part of it, and that's why we wanted that professional services bucket that could capture companies that may not be manufacturers or technology or software companies, but maybe urban designers, architects, or just smart cities thinkers. If, I mentioned sort of in passing that the transportation tech strategy was written by an architect. And so when you read through sort of how she articulates and how we're articulating our vision of the future, it is very much grounded with a high quality public realm and making sure that transportation and technology serve the city and not the other way around. And the only way we accomplish that is through design. So there are things in that strategy that we want to deliver. An example is a design guide for the Internet of Things. Right, so, we have these opportunities to put in these smart street lights. We put in one, and it's amazing. It does all kinds of things, at Julian's Fries, whatever. But it looks like something that came out of the brutalist Soviet bloc, right? And as we, every week I get phone calls from companies that want to hang all kinds of things on my traffic signals and my infrastructure. The quality of that design, its beauty and its respectfulness of the people who live in the city is going to be integral to us being successful. So it's very, very much at the heart of what we're thinking about. We're using the transportation tech strategy as a guide, but again, we want to take a very collaborative approach, right? We want to be co-ideating things with smart people in the private sector and community-based organizations, and that can happen inside or outside the bench. But the bench is just a way for us to very quickly, once we think we've settled on an idea, push that out and get somebody under contract to work with us more directly. Does that answer all your questions? Is there any other question you have that I can answer?
Okay, a very specific scenario. If somebody has an idea to close off the Arts District to traffic for a certain part of the week, in the future, not to be on the bench, but how is, because that's something that, isn't done right now. Like, how do you ask for input on that at the city?
So we get those kinds of things all the time. Some of them are ideas that we originated at LADOT. An example is a program that we started 2 years ago called Play Streets, right? So the idea is that we go into Park 4 neighborhoods, we close a street for a day, and we roll up a park in a truck, basically, and roll out that park for kids to come and play and have an opportunity to experience their street in a different way. We learned a ton from that. In the second year, we're actually expanding the program. We're raising the quality of the design. We're sort of fine-tuning some of the street closure issues, etc. But we also get requests from outside the city all the time to do projects like that. And they come to life in various ways. There are ways to do those. The city has formal ways that you can close off streets. But there are also, opportunities to sort of work with the city, find a champion in the community, and bring those kinds of ideas to life.
I think this gentleman here first.
Hi, Mark Jensen, Cambridge Systematics. A question on the framework for how you're organizing this above and beyond the DOT. For example, let's say GM wants to do a test in the LA region. Do you have a process or framework to work with LA Metro, Caltrans to be able to find the champion among the agencies to engage with an OEM, for example?
Yes, so that was the purpose of the Transportation Technology Coalition. The coalition has Metro, SCAG, the port, the airport, this LADOT, Caltrans, the county, and did I miss anybody?
DPW.
Oh, and the Department of Power and Water as well. That group actually has a charter agreement signed by all of the CEOs, general managers, directors of those different agencies, and has already been successful in applying for some grants, but also bringing to life some demonstrations. So there's a freight demonstration on, was it 101 or 110?
Yeah, there's a demonstration ongoing on 110 and also on the 210 at the moment.
And one connected with the port. So that's kind of that's the clearinghouse and the sort of one-stop shop to do that kind of work.
Carly, did you have a question as well?
Hi, Carly Mark. Carly, do you want to take that question about the Olympics? Nope, you did great. Carly Markovitz with AECOM. I wanted to follow up on the question about the Coalition for Transportation Technology. So in terms of your goals as LADOT, how do you envision building off of that coalition to potentially regionalize some of the concepts and objectives for the city?
So, I think about LADOT as the laboratory and Metro as being able to do things at scale. And that only happens if we have true buy-in and ownership on both sides for what we're out there doing. So a lot of the ideas that we have and that those agencies have get brought to that coalition, and then various partners raise their hands and say, I'm really interested in, working on this kind of opportunity. And it's worth noting, the bench is available for use by any department in the city. So it's not just a bench for LADOT. If Bureau of Street Services wants to think about how to use drones for maintenance or driverless sweepers for bike path maintenance, they can use LADOT's bench to do that work. It's also potentially usable by Metro. So, Metro, county, others, it's, of course, not easy, but there are ways that we exchange funds for different projects and access each other's consultants and benches. And so it does have, the bench has the opportunity for much broader reach and broader application than the city. And really, the work with the tech coalition has been to get them excited about that opportunity.
Over here, I have a question. America Seves, community organizer with Proyecto Pastoral. I oversee the Community Action Initiative, which is the community organizing and civic engagement arm of Proyecto Pastoral. We also were a recent Great Streets recipient.
Your project was amazing. Amazing.
Oh, thank you so much. And my question was in particular with the requirements for the CBOs, and I just want to say that this is really exciting, the opportunity to for CBOs to work more closely with LADOT, especially with the community engagement process. We're also part of the Vision Zero Alliance, alongside with other amazing organizations that are also trying to look for opportunities where we can work in partnership to resolve some of the most alarming concerns from the community, specifically with safety and mobility issues. How is it that LADOT determined the requirements for the CBOs to serve on the open bench, call bench? Sorry, I'm changing terminology, open call bench. And then also had a follow-up question with regards to that, specifically with the touch points.
So can you tell me a little more what you mean by qualifications?
I'm at the list of for the CBO organizations, just as far as some of the requirements that would be considered, and one of them specifically that I was a little concerned about was the mass space, 5,000 or more participants for outreach strategies and mechanisms. That seems to me like a quite a large touch point requirement, especially just having gone through the process where we did a massive community engagement process and we barely were able to get over 1,000 touch points. So I just wanted to ask a little bit more, because along the line I could see that being a challenge for some CBOs to be able to meet that threshold. Even thinking of it from the longer standpoint of quality versus quantity. So I just wanted to, hear a little bit more as far as how did DOT make those determinations for the CBO requirements.
It's going to be a good question for Vic, actually.
Well, within the RFQ selection criteria, we encourage all CBO firms to participate in the process, and we have the process where the team will review and make recommendations and rank the firms to be qualified. But we encourage all the firms that meet the minimum requirement to participate in the process.
So is 5,000 not a minimum requirement? 5,000 points not a minimum requirement?
No, but we will make a selection based on the selection criteria. I think that what you mentioned is stated in the in the text of the RFQ itself, but the qualification is what we're looking for. The evaluation, like 40% qualification of proposal, 40% of staff, but those are the criteria that we base on. I hope I answered your question.
Did that answer your question? So we take that as, we take that input, that's very helpful in terms of, but I think what Dick is saying is that that's not a selection criteria.
Okay, thank you so much. That's helpful.
Great, why don't we go with that, David? Could you give us a second?
Hi, Amanda Carlson with Public Matters. Along the lines of the CBOs, one of the requirements for the qualifications is the company profile or annual report. Do you have any suggestions for what can stand in for organizations that may not have those formal documents?
If you don't have a profit and loss prepared by a CPA, that would be acceptable. Or an annual report.
Is the intention of that to understand sort of the fiscal side of the operation?
That's the right reason having, because we have all the benches, we have all sort of firms, so that's the general. But for CBO, it's more special in different form, a normal corporation. So that's the reason why we want to accept what your profit and loss, or if you prefer, you can submit the tax return. That will be treated confidential, that part of the consideration.
Okay, so we should just mark those as for non-disclosure for the public. Okay, thank you.
Great, over here.
Hello, I'm Sanjeev Sehgal. I'm representing Satwick Inc., a company based out of Glendale. We are an IT support services organization which has a bench contract with LAWA, LAUSD, CompTIA, and few other city agencies. Answer to one of your questions was you're encouraging 25% or small businesses and MBs to partner with primes to participate in this particular bench. One of the ways to connect with the primes, which we do not know, is today's forum where we meet people and we work with them. Are there other creative ways to network in between now and November deadline so that we don't miss the boat and we are able to get a piece of work based on our competency and not just our status?
I just want to quickly add that I want to make the list of participants available to everyone. So keep an eye out on LADOT and it'll have a list of all the companies.
Thank you.
I just answer the question. Basically, we encourage all the firms, either minority, women, disadvantaged, or emerging business to partner with the client contract. That is the underlying reason of the business inclusion program that the mayor directed. We encourage firms to participate as a sub. So we have the list of the firms that will participate. It's posted in Darwin. So take the opportunity and network with them, send them email, make some phone call, and do what it will take to get the business. That's what we want you to do.
Well, and the teaming opportunity doesn't just extend to getting onto the bench. It extends to individual opportunities that we put out to the bench.
Carlos?
Thank you. Carlos Rfq with Bantic. We're a small SPEV firm. My question is, can we prime it if we like, because we meet some of the criteria, and can also be a sub to some of the large firms?
The question whether you are A certified firms, whether you can be a sub.
Oh, and also prime it.
And a prime. Yes, you can be both.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the program itself? Go ahead.
Yeah. We're coming up.
Hi, my name is Katie. I'm from Rfq Studios. My question in the RFQ document is, it notes on page 9 that we don't need to do the BIP outreach, but then in the Exhibit 1 checklist, it says that we do. Can you please clarify?
Can I just start real quick? So yeah, I mean, we included all the standard documents in the back. That's just standard, but we noted in the beginning that it's not a requirement, just so you're aware. Did you want to add anything else?
Even though we waive the requirements of the business inclusion program, but we encourage firms to complete the Schedule A. We list all the stuff or potential stuff that your firm might be interested, so that we know who will be the potential stuff, and when we report that information in the business inclusion program, let's say you get awarded and you plan to have the stuff. So that is information that we want to give it to all the firms in the BIT, know that these are the stuffs.
Hi, this is Nia with Parsons. I have a question about whether there's a limitation of the firms selected on the bench. Is it still allowed to be in big construction work?
Could you clarify that question a little bit more?
The limitation of any firm that to be selected on the bench, is it still allowed? Is there an exclusive policy for the project that the company can bid for the future project? Can it be, is it excluded from bidding some construction work, PSE type of work?
If you selected to be on the bench, we do not recruit you from future projects. Based on the current RFP language, so you are included, you can bid on future projects.
Okay, so there's no limitation?
No, there's no restrictions.
Thank you.
I also want to note that you don't have to apply for these task order opportunities as well. You can be on the bench, you don't necessarily have to apply for every single task order solicitations.
Is there a limit to the number of firms that you're looking to select for the bench? Just 5 firms, 10 firms?
Yeah, we're trying to see what the market looks like, so we'll reach out, depending on how many responses we get, we'll make that determination. We'll make that public as well.
But we're not starting out with a cap.
Not at the moment. Data here, Stacey? IDI? We'll start from over there first.
Hello, let's say a task order comes out and there's some specialized expertise not on our team. Can we bring on somebody for a specific task order, or are we locked into the existing set of subs that we have?
We don't have a restriction for subcontracting, so you can be any firm that to be on your team to meet the task order solicitation.
Yes, correct. The idea of the bench is to give you maximum flexibility, even, opportunity to opportunity. If you come on the bench as a prime and you don't have any subs, you can customize your team for every opportunity that comes out, and there's not a limit on that. And you can team with other people on the bench. You can team with companies that are not on any bench.
Stacey?
Stacey Elms with IBI. Once the companies have been selected and the bench has been finalized, is there a timeline for when things will start rolling out, projects? And also, will there be opportunities for the firms to come meet, to pitch ideas, to discuss our opportunities?
So I would say we don't have a specific timeline in mind yet, because we're optimistic that we'll be able to get the bench finalized according to the schedule that is in the documents, but I've been in the city long enough to know that would be foolish to say that it's a guarantee. So, but, we have money this fiscal year, and we've already, for our current bench, we have a consultant team under contract who's been working on the next scope of work to move the transportation technology forward. We also have several ideas in our queue that we want to start pushing out to the bench. So my intention and my interest is to start using the bench as soon as it's ready. In terms of pitching ideas or specific ideas that you have that you want to bring to the city, we're generally always open to those. If it becomes, after we have the bench put together, if it becomes obvious that there would be value to having sort of an organized way of offering companies an opportunity to come do that, we will do that. But so far, what's worked is that we just sort of do those on an ad hoc basis. And we also reach out to companies that we're interested in working with. So it sort of goes both directions.
Over here.
Are you sure?
Your last one.
Keep going. It's fine.
So related to the fund, two questions related to the funding. Are there already specific projects identified that you want to have go out via the bench? And then what are the funding levels for this fiscal year and the follow-on fiscal year?
So in terms of the funding levels, you know, I'm hesitant to sort of put a number out there because the funding comes in through a variety of doors. We have Prop A and Prop C funding that we use for transit that we expect to use to push out to do demonstration projects around autonomous and connected transit. We have funding, as I mentioned, that's coming in through Measure M that we expect to push out for mobility hubs, first last mile. We also anticipate funding opportunities coming in through the state, cap and trade. There is SB1 funding that is going to come specifically to transit operators and transit agencies. You know, so there's a whole host of funding sources available, but there's also the city's budget, which is where we got the sort of funding that we have now for the current consulting contract, and then LADOT has a lot of that sort of consulting professional services budget inside. So I'm not confident to give you an exact number of funding level, but that is the sort of universe of where we think the money is going to come from. And air quality money, Angela is mentioning air quality money that the city gets. It's just a slice of the pie allocation that the city gets every year to do that kind of air quality mitigation work. But then there are things like the Transformative Climate Communities opportunity that we couldn't have anticipated necessarily a couple of years ago that are substantial. It's a, how big is that one?
30 million.
One-time $30 million allocation to you know, a project. So there's, I'm anticipating there will be more funding for this in the future, not less. In terms of specific projects, we will have a scope of work to sort of take the next, the transportation tech strategy to the next level. But we also have a lot of opportunistic projects, right? We're doing a very small contract right now with a design firm to help us with the design sort of criteria and specifications for mobility hubs to inform the request for proposals that we're putting out. So there's, I would say, you know, maybe 5 to 10 ideas floating around, percolating around that are that flavor.
We have a little bit extra time here, so we can also open it up for some legal questions or process questions as well.
This side here.
Alex Carries with GM. Maybe we can talk a little generally about the IP generated on the bench. I imagine it's going to be a project by project, but how do you envision that happening?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, certainly it'll be on a project by project basis. I'm not sure if it was supposed to be for him or for myself, but yeah, certainly it'll be. We'll consider it the fact that there is an IP component. There may be various different structures that we can work with to make sure that that whatever is generated is agreeable in terms of how we separate them or how we own them. I'll defer to Michael Nagel here.
Yeah, we look at those on an individual basis. Our IP team will look at those as they come in.
I mean, generally, I thought one of the things that we were trying to aim at was that there could be different submittals for deliverables, right? One that is sort of protected and one that is available to share with the public. And I'll just say, in general, my interest is not in the particulars of your algorithm or of your technology or of your, my interest is in what are the outcomes it achieves, right? So I do care about, and we've engaged, you know, academic partners like UCLA and SC to help us with evaluation. You know, did it get people to where they're going in a timely way? Did it capture a large number of older adults or people with disabilities, because that's the audience we were trying to get to? Did it capture did it work for people who are in low-income communities? Did it get used? Was it something that was powerful in sort of giving people options? I care a lot less about the brains of how it all comes together. And so the bench is there not to necessarily for us to harvest a bunch of technology and technological information. It's there to help us achieve the goals and outcomes that I outlined.
Second question. Can you talk a little bit about how the work of the bench is communicated to beyond within formats like this, how the aspirations of this work is then communicated out to the city of Los Angeles and its residents?
So that's a good question. I think broadly, we use the communications tools that we have at our disposal, right? The transportation technology strategy is really our sort of public-facing roadmap of what we're hoping to accomplish and what we're hoping to get done. We also work with media, we work with community groups, we work with neighborhood councils, we work with schools, we work with business associations to do our work in a collaborative way. And the reason why really having that bucket of community-based organizations was important is because that's not our skill set necessarily. That's not our strength. And what we know we need in order to understand how these things can benefit people are good organizers and good communicators and people who know and understand how to work with community so that they can partner with us. An example of that is actually the EV car sharing program. So we had a bench, an advisory committee of nonprofits that advised the actual formation of the request for proposals for that program. They have continued to be important ambassadors and work with us on community outreach. And through the community outreach, which we discovered that things like having access to a car seat is really important for car sharing for women and families who want to use the service. Being able to put somebody who is not in your immediate family on your membership is important for people who are managing caregivers and want those folks to be able to take their aging parents to doctor's appointments or go get medicine or groceries, that's really important. Those are the kinds of insights that are critical to us being successful and not just outputs but outcomes, which is really what we're after. And so how we push that out to the city is, the partnership with community-based organizations is a really important part of that, in addition to all of the sort of normal tools that we use.
Any other second questions? Lady in the back.
Hi, I'm Natasha Myers with Orange People. I had a question related to one of the evaluations. It said, describe your firm's communication experience with staff, stakeholders, advisory groups, and decision makers. Just wondering if you could provide a little more detail as to, is that just internal communications or what you're looking for there?
I think this is a question for Dick here.
So we're looking for basically the qualifications that you propose or that you will submit, and then the panel will look at it. So 40% for one category and another 40% for another for staff.
Internal, external, all of it, right? Right. I mean, what kind of tools and methods do you use, and what's been your experience, right? What are the projects where you've done that kind of work, and how has it, what kinds of stakeholders have you communicated with, and how, and just sort of those kinds of details to give us a flavor of your work.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to piggyback on that really quickly. Basically, the eligibility criteria, I noticed that there is certain weights for prior work, and I know that there was another question earlier on from an AI company about if you're not strong in the eligibility requirements, that you can have a partner with a larger company in order to meet that eligibility requirement. How would that play into the core company that is responding to this RFQ in terms of the partnership, right? So our company has not had prior experience of projects of this size, but we have a partnership with someone who has. How would that play into the eligibility requirements?
So I think that if you are a smaller firm, first of all, there's not necessarily hard sort of lines that we have about the size of your prior work. So, we just want to see what you've done. And we want to sort of make the screening panel then makes a decision based on, you may have done an amazing project for under $25,000 with 5 different neighborhoods, right? And that's valuable. We want to know about that. We want to understand that. I think in terms of the prime, and as a former consultant, I guess, I can understand how their primes might feel like, well, we just want to get onto the bench and then we'll decide which partners we want to bring on and customize for each opportunity. And so, however, there may be some primes that really have a hole in their qualifications in a place that you could fill in. And that's really the purpose of sharing the information about who's in the room and who's interested in bidding, so that you can sort of do that strategic evaluation and pitch those companies on the value add that your company brings to their proposal for a particular bench.
Okay, thank you.
Julia?
Hello, I'm Julie Thane from Siemens. So you mentioned your vision, infrastructure as a service, data as a service, and mobility as a service. In your vision, how much of that is expected to be owned and operated by LADOT versus owned and operated by the private sector, special purpose vehicles, etc.?
So the vision that I have, so first of all, LADOT will continue to manage and operate the streets and the curb, right? And the city will continue to manage and operate the infrastructure, the signals, the street lights, the street signs, all of the sort of the pieces, the puzzle pieces that create sort of the public realm. And our role will continue to be to manage and operate that safely and efficiently. In terms of, whose wheels are rolling over or whose wings are flying over our infrastructure, that we are more agnostic on. LADOT has a history already of contracting out transit service, right? We work with MV and Transdev to deliver our Dash and Commuter Express services. So LADOT does some of the inspections, we acquire the vehicles, we set the routes, we set the fares, we set the rules for who can advertise on the buses, which Mike Nagel enjoys deeply. But we don't actually operate the service, and we don't necessarily maintain the vehicles, right? But we provide the facilities where the vehicles can be maintained. So that partnership, what I think is really important as we see sort of traditional public transit being sort of cannibalized by private services for those who can afford it. That we still have low and very low income folks who rely on the transit service we provide as a lifeline service. That you could imagine sort of a centralized digital dispatch that the city might operate that matches private providers in a mobility marketplace with the trips that are necessary. I don't think there's going to be a single mobility provider that's going to be able to dominate, monopolize the entire market. LA is just too big, right? So we're going to need to have multiple players, and for that to work for consumers, so that it grows the pie and everybody is successful, we're going to need to have as many great services as possible. So the bench and the city's vision is really that we are the convener of those services, and that we're investing in those services to make sure that they go to Royal Heights and South LA, and not just Century City and Venice. So that's kind of I don't know if that answers your question, but we don't, how that actually looks, I think it would be difficult to predict. But I did feel strongly that the only way the city is going to be able to influence things like fares and routes and other things like that is if we have real skin in the game, and we're really actually investing in those services ourselves. And the fastest way and the most efficient way and the most nimble way for us to do that is a bench.
Just a follow-up question.
for that. So some of the infrastructure might be new infrastructure, including electric vehicle chargers and that sort of thing. Does the same answer apply, or for that matter, databases that blend public and private sector data?
Yeah, I think it's going to be important for us to be able to, for example, map and make transparent to folks the locations of all charging infrastructure, whether or not it's something that the city or private provider owns. Our sort of most visceral experience with that was doing the contract negotiations for the EV car sharing to figure out who owns that infrastructure and who owns it over time. So we don't go into things necessarily feeling strongly that we must continue to monopolize ownership, but there does have to be sort of a relationship between the city and the private provider around that infrastructure. Because when you look around Los Angeles, you can see generations of infrastructure ideas that were, begun and abandoned. You can think of public payphones. You can think of our emergency air sirens, right? That are sort of all over the landscape. A bunch of projects with bus benches or mosaics in the sidewalk where there wasn't a clear sort of ownership structure, and it wasn't clear who was accountable for that infrastructure, so no one's accountable for it. And over time, that's problematic. So not going into it, I don't feel like we must own the infrastructure, but there has to be some sort of a clear agreement over time what the different roles are.
Hi, I'm Ellen from Salt Landscape Architects. And just wanted to dovetail onto that question. Some of the ephemeral spaces that you mentioned earlier in your presentation, would the operation of those change throughout the day if they change from an ephemeral park into a street, depending on, I know this is sort of hard in the future, but.
Right, so the question is, who owns, the Play Street hit of parks? Who owns the People Street hit of parks? And the answer is that our sort of, we have lots of programs like that create temporary sort of reimagining and reallocating a space, formerly a street that becomes a space for people, either for a day or more of an ongoing basis. As far as the actual infrastructure that creates those spaces, the city owns it. The city sort of invests in it, pays for it. We're responsible for it. When it becomes, when a car hits it or when it becomes damaged, we're responsible. But we do have contracts and agreements with community-based organizations for the maintenance and programming of those spaces. So that's not our strength and our skill set, but we know it is the strength and skill set of, the image there of Lombard Plaza, that community programs that space is hardly ever empty. And as a result, it is well loved and it is better maintained. And those folks are also responsible for cleaning and maintaining the space itself. But as far as who sort of, if we imagine a future where you push a button and some bollards go up and there's a retractable park that rolls out, who's pushing that button and who's responsible for that infrastructure. We have a prototype for how we think that works through partnership with communities. But that's something that we'll have to figure out because there's no playbook for that.
LADOT?
I have a question regarding walkability in the downtown area. Sorry, just pretty much introduce myself. I'm Kevin from ARS, Disabled Women's Enterprise. And just as we're concerned about access for wheelchairs, we're also concerned about pedestrian safety. So we talked about the reduction of fatalities by zero in 2025. And has there been, I'm sure I'm not the first person asking this question, about the compromise between traffic congestion and walkability in the downtown area?
So broader policy question, I think, probably not so much about the bench itself, but that, Vision Zero and the mobility plan that the City Council adopted, which are really important pieces of the policy framework within which we operate, along with the Sustainable City Plan. And I think most of those we made available through the website. People want to access those resources. Sustainable City Plan, Vision Zero Action Plan, are those available online? Or can we make them available online for people?
Yeah.
Great.
that's the policy framework that lays out what that balance is. Obviously, it is not always straightforward, and it is a policy decision. So a lot of times when we do outreach, which is really why the community-based organization bench is there, and when we work with our elected officials, we have to sort of try and thread that needle. Vision Zero clearly articulates that the North Star is pedestrian safety, but that there's no such thing as a prototypical block in downtown Los Angeles or in the city of LA. So there's no sort of one answer to what does that look like. And the city is just getting started on Vision Zero. It's relatively new. It's been around for 2 years. And in that time, we've put in over 400 crosswalk upgrades, over 120 intersection improvement projects. We're continuing to sort of focus and push the balance towards walkability as much as we possibly can. In and around downtown, you'll see most of the signals are timed to give people walking what we call a head start, which allows you to step off the curb or roll off the curb before the driver gets a green light. So it really does prioritize and elevate the person walking being able to establish themselves in the crosswalk before the driver goes to make their turn.
Sorry, it's a very general question, but thank you.
Hello, my name is Rfq. I'm with Firelight Engineering. I have a couple of questions, very simple. One, in terms of when you get ready to fund your projects, are you able to stepwise your project? Let's say your transportation project was something like flying cars, which are definitely on the horizon. I mean, it's definitely coming. So they will be vertically taking you to different locations.
Sure, why not?
Right, exactly. So is in your envision, because maybe that's not something that technology can emerge tomorrow, but maybe the stepwise, the motors may begin to develop, how you maybe extend the flaps or the wings, whatever technology you would come up with. Is that something that you would see helping to fund, to develop?
I guess am I going to put out a task order solicitation for flying cars to the bench?
Right.
No.
That's the FAA.
But, and do I care so much about the actual technology?
Yes.
Maybe. Right? But do I care about, as a regulator and as somebody who cares deeply about where and when, mobility drone can operate? Then I probably would put out to the bench, a project or an opportunity to help inform the city's regulatory approach. What is the data that we need? What are the kinds of systems that we need to be putting in place now to operate a municipal air traffic control, right? And how do we begin to engage sort of the FAA or the state legislature in what are the regulatory authorities that we should be caring about when it comes to those kinds of those kind of future sort of opportunities, because it's much easier to make those regulations proactively when those things still seem, way off in the future. But we know there are people in this room, and there are people in this city, and there are people in this country who are thinking about those things. And so we would want that we might put something out to the bench that's really more about the public policy, where the person who bids on that successfully needs to understand the technology in order to inform us about what are the regulatory levers and public policy levers that we should be really focused on. But not necessarily about the technology itself. But your other question is about phasing, and the answer is absolutely. I mean, I think the point of that wheel at the end of the presentation is to underline the fact that we do think we're going to be constantly iterating. We're going to be putting out opportunities of all sizes on a constant basis to iterate towards whatever those things we actually eventually call these things that fly around in the air. It's terrifying. We need to iterate towards that, right? So we're not going to be able to boil the whole ocean with a single task order solicitation. We expect to phase things in, which is what we're doing now, right? We have a smallish consultant contract. It's just under $500,000 that's out, that we have under contract right now to help us move the transportation tech strategy forward. The one after that is going to be a little bigger. The one after that is going to be a little bigger, right?
One last question. Is VR and AR in your radar on your sites? Virtual reality or augmented reality?
Hey, Mike Lim.
Excuse me, I was answering.
Question is about, are we thinking about VR and AR?
I think we're open to it. I mean, we're pretty open in terms of any kind of new ideas and such. If VR and AR can improve the way that AV connected vehicles can serve the residents of Los Angeles, we're certainly open to it.
We also did jointly fund the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment, City Planning, and DOT. I'm not sure which one it was, VR or AR. Intervention for community outreach, right? So letting people walk around a redesigned street as a tool to help them understand what it might look like and feel like. We used another tool called Allies to do something similar for our Main and Spring Street projects downtown. So I think we're certainly also, open to it as an outreach tool.
Just want to note again that we're creating this bench. It's not exclusive right now. I mean, there are a number of terms that we use. We're open to new ideas. So to the extent that you can articulate good ideas and articulate why you should be on the bench, we're very open to your thoughts. I think we have time for maybe one more question. Gentleman in the back.
Thank you. My name is Luke Gaskell, and I'm with Siemens, and predominantly the qualifications for this are people, projects, and reference where you've done some things, and being a very international company, that's really not going to come from the U.S. They really have been in the forefront, and California is not there either. So we're seeing most of that work being done in the Middle East and Europe and in Asia right now. When we submit on this too, we may have resources that are not based in the U.S. or necessarily California. And the projects wouldn't be there. So will that have an impact on the grading process, the fact they're not from California or necessarily the U.S.?
No, there is no impact.
Great. So why don't we wrap it up here? Thank you for coming. Thank you, panelists, for quickly note if there are any other questions that we may not have answered today, or if you come up with additional questions later, you can either submit the questions out there by registration or also through our online or our email address, which is ladot.innovation@lsd.org.
Excuse me, can you tell me how to get to San Pedro?
San Pedro? Where are you coming from?
I'm coming from Hollywood.
Oh, you know what? You might want to go to Venice.
I think I'll go to Soul. LADOT, transporting you and me. LADOT, transporting you and me.
Cycle to the valley.
Taxi to downtown.
Ride your way to Hollywood.
Escape Venice Beach.
Dash to San Pedro.
Drive to South LA.
Commuter Express. To the